My name is Zoya and I have a story to tell. But going back, we'll start with I am one of three girls. I am the older sister, and I grew up in a home with a mum and dad who were migrants who did everything they could, even in challenging times, to provide and care for us. And it was hard at times, but we stuck together. And God was good, and provided our needs. But that didn't take away the hard challenges and the tough moments. But family was something that was grounded in me from a very young age. And we're also taught a lot of principles and values which have become a treasure, not just in my life, but in the life of my children and investment. So to me, my ideals were just family, life, love, friends, and food, and to always look upon others and just to give them a hand, if someone was down and out, to just show up and be there for them. And I was happy and content to have that life, right? And so as years went on, you go through school, and then I finished school. And as I finished school, I met my wonderful husband, Andrew. I was 20 years old. And so the way we met was I was at university and we did a physical challenge there. And even though I looked really good, but my physical activity didn't meet the standard, and they told me you should join a gym and get a bit more active. So I went to join the gym, and as I was talking to the manager there, Andrew pulls up on his motorbike and walks in, and he's walking behind the counter as I'm chatting away with his manager, Jerry, gives me the look, and I'm like, oh, he's not bad looking. And then that afternoon I went upstairs and I'm on the rowing machine, and he came up to me and he's like, hi, my name is Andrew. And I said, yeah. He goes, your name's Zoya? And I said, mm-hmm. And he said, that's a Russian name. And I said, oh. And he goes, he goes, are you Russian? I said, no. He goes, but I'm Russian. And I'm thinking, oh, this guy, go away, and I'm rowing away on my boat, the rower. And he goes, I'll be doing your physical assessment for you. And I'm thinking, oh. So he takes me to this room later on, and he's, measuring your body fat and things like that. And he wanted to put the tape measure around my leg. And I said, you give me that tape, I'm not letting you touch my leg. So he did that. And then before you knew it, I was coming to the gym, more perfume, hair done, a bit more makeup. And then one night his manager wasn't, working, and we're just chatting away, and we come from a bit of a dinosaur. So back then there was the movie Judge Dredd, and it was promoting the movie on the radio. And I said, who would go watch such a movie? And he said, I would. And he goes, well, the football game is on this weekend. And it was the grand final. And he goes for the Sea Eagles, and I go for the Bulldogs. And so I said to him, okay, but if the Bulldogs win, you're going to go watch Pocahontas. And that was the beginning of our relationship. And that year, after that weekend, we went and watched Pocahontas. So the Bulldogs won. So then we worked hard together. We didn't have much support from family, not because they couldn't support, but just that's, the position they were in. So we worked hard to save a deposit to buy a home, with the intention of getting married, which we did. And we got married and started a beautiful family. I have 4 beautiful children. Anthony, Angelica, Alexander, and Adam. They are God's gift to me. I've always wanted to be a mum. Especially when I had my first son, Anthony. I remember I held him in my arms and I thanked God. And I just saw him as a miracle. And I just wanted to know so many things about pain and suffering and life. And I remember looking at him and I cried out to God and I said, God, why does this baby have to die one day? And that was very challenging because I didn't have the answers to that. And I thought, when this precious thing asks me one day, I don't have the answers. So I went home and, first time mum, you're busy. And I just got into, learning to be a mum for him and looking after him. And then I fell pregnant with Angelica. And once again, I'm at the hospital holding her and telling her how precious she is. And that I practiced everything on her older brother. She's not the guinea pig, and I was going to do a lot better with her. And then it dawned on me again that, why does my baby girl have to die one day? Why do we die? And that was something that just always stuck with me. And then again, I went back home, got into the busyness of motherhood, and never thought about it much. And then someone one day came across into my life, and I started to, be challenged about these things. And I didn't have the answers. And then they said, have you ever read the Bible for yourself? And I said, no. And then, I went back and forth with this person. I had a lot of questions. I can be quite critical when it comes to things, which can be a good thing as well. Because then once I accept something to be truth, for me, it is truth, full stop. And so I opened up the Bible and I read the Gospel of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John in a very short period of time. And it was at that point I understood and believed that sin had entered into the world. And through sin, the wages of sin was death, and that we are all sinners. And then, but I also saw that with that came the mercy and the grace of God through Calvary and what Jesus did for me on Calvary, that I may have a home in heaven with him. And I thought, God, you answered my prayer. I wanted to know, and you've dropped this on my lap. So then I accepted the Lord Jesus Christ as my personal Saviour on the 17th of March 2009. And I gave him my life, that no matter what he would bring my way, I would honour him with it. Moving forward, the kids are getting a little bit older now. And like I said, I love family, friends, and food. And we always had an open home and people over. And that's what always brought us the joy. And on this particular day, it was February 2015, was having my cousin and her family over. And we're getting the house all cleaned up. And I had done all the food, which we love. And I felt some symptoms. I was getting itchy across the chest. I thought, okay, I'm running around, I'm a bit sweaty, nothing to worry about. We enjoyed the day, and that night I started to feel a strange fatigue. And I thought, okay, it's just busy, I had a busy week. And through the night, it got really itchy across my chest again, and I must have scratched it through the night, got a bit infected, I guess, by the morning. I thought, better go to the doctors. Went to the doctor, gave me the antibiotics, and went home, took those antibiotics, calmed the situation down, but didn't clear it up. So I went back again, gave me another course of antibiotics. Same thing happened, calmed things down, but just would not clear it up. Went back to the doctor again, and I said, something's not right. He goes, all right, we'll change antibiotics. Sometimes with these things we need to do that. We changed the antibiotics, took that course, and it wasn't clearing it up. So I went back again. I said, something is wrong, Then he started to say, well, maybe have you changed your washing liquid? It's dermatitis. And I said, no, this is not dermatitis. I've never had anything like this before. I haven't changed anything in my home. Something is wrong. He wanted to give me another course of antibiotics. I wasn't happy with that. I went home and I thought, I'll just leave it alone. It'll go away. And then I started to feel sensations in my body, like something was crawling all over my arms and legs, and like bugs. And so I went back to him and I said, something's wrong. The rash is not going away. And now I'm starting to feel like there's bugs crawling up my arms and down my legs. It's a strange sensation. He gave me a lotion to bathe in, which I did, and that didn't take that away. So I didn't go back. I'm thinking I just was tolerating it. And then I started to feel the sensation of burning in my limbs and my arms and my legs. And I thought, something's escalating here. So I went back to the doctor again, and they started with the blood tests. He'd do the blood tests. I'd go back in and he'd tell me, you're perfectly fine. You're a mum of 4 kids. You're just probably run down. Go home. I'd go home and I'd persevere with the fatigue, the crawling and the itching, the burning sensation, and this rash that was starting to now spread itself all over my body. Back to the doctor again, another blood test again, and my blood works would show that I was perfectly fine. They just did the same blood works over and over. Liver function test, full blood count, the general stuff, and all of those would show that there was nothing wrong. So they'd send me home and tell me nothing was wrong. Then I started to lose weight. I lost 25 kilos in about 3 months. I went back to the doctor and I said, and I started to sweat profusely. I said, something is wrong. So then he started to send me to the specialists. I went to see a gastrologist who did an endoscopy and a colonoscopy. The results came back, there's nothing wrong. Sent me to a neurologist because by then I started to shudder. So I would have jerking motions and where I would shudder. And they checked me for MS, Parkinson's. They told me, no, nothing is wrong. My heart rate would go from 74 to about 135. I would hear it whooshing in my ears. So as I'm telling you this, these are all the symptoms all happening. It's like a storm. It's all happening at the same time. And they sent me to a cardiologist, checked my heart, said nothing's wrong with your heart. They got me to wear the Holter monitor. And they said, yes, it has spiked, but there's nothing that's pointing to anything. Your heart is fine. They, did the stress tests and things like that. This is anxiety. So then they started to tell me, some doctors, you're suffering from anxiety. And I said, nothing has happened in my life to bring on this course of symptoms and anxiety. Something is wrong. Then we started to go from doctor to doctor, hoping that some doctor would pick up what was wrong. 1 year later, 13 doctors. By then, I had lost a lot of weight. I was no longer able to function, drive, shower, or eat. I was dry retching constantly. I could no longer enjoy the things that I loved. And I asked God to help them find what was wrong or take me home, because I was just suffering in front of my family and I could see the heartache it was putting on them. About 2 weeks later, I'm bedridden by now and I'm giving up because I fought for a year. A friend of mine, actually someone very close and dear to me, she's not just my friend, she's my sister. She suffers clinical depression. And she said to me, I've told my psychiatrist about you, and he's interested in wanting to see you and speak to you. If anyone's going to diagnose you with anxiety and depression, because when they couldn't figure out what was wrong, that's what the diagnosis was, he's going to be the one. So I went in to see him, Professor Philip Boyce. He sat down. Obviously by now I'm a basket case. I'm, emotional. I'm not sleeping. I'm not eating, shuddering, burning. I didn't know what was going on. Everything was going on. And I told him what was happening with the symptoms. He asked me a few questions. And then at the end of the session, he said to me, this is not a atypical clinical case of anxiety and depression. You're exhibiting these symptoms because you're not eating, you're not sleeping, and with what's going on. But I'm working with a professor of immunology here in the hospital on diseases that can present themselves this way, and I need for you to see him right away. He said, I'll organise the referral. And within, I think, a day, I was in that doctor's office. This doctor, this immunologist checked me from head to toe. He requested blood works that were sent to the University of Queensland. And he said to me, you have had everything checked but your breasts. While we're waiting for the test results to come back, go back to your general practitioner and have your breasts checked out. I didn't go back and do that because I thought I've been poked and prodded for 1 year. there is nothing wrong. I thought I had a rare disease that they don't know about, and that was, and he was going to find it in these special blood tests that he was going to do. So I come back 2 weeks later, and before I even sat down, he goes, "How did you go with your breasts?" And I said, "I didn't have them checked out. I've been poked and prodded for 1 year." And he grabbed his notepad and a pen, and he was displeased. He actually huffed. And I said, "Why? What's wrong?" I said, "Do you believe?" Because I had a lump in my breast, but I thought it was just one of those ones that come and go as I had them growing up. I said, "Why do you believe that what's in my breast could be causing all these symptoms?" And he said, "Very well may be. I need you to go to the Breast Cancer Institute." And, right away. And he wrote urgent. I went in the following day. They started to do an ultrasound over the lump, and I could see the radiologist was, going over it many times. And I asked her, I said, "Do I have breast cancer?" And she said, "Look, you have to wait for the doctors to look at it, and they'll come in and speak with you." And I said to her, "Okay, I know you can't tell me. Can you tell me if what you're looking at has irregular borders?" And I saw her almost swallow, and she kind of nodded her head slightly. And I remember I almost felt a sensation of relief that I finally found what was wrong. And it wasn't in my head. And it was breast cancer. It told me to come back on Friday morning at 8 o'clock. So I went out and I rang my husband. I said, "I have breast cancer." And he goes, "Who told you that?" And I said, "No one needs to tell me. I know we found what's wrong." I went to my appointment at 8 o'clock that morning, that Friday morning. They took me into an office. I walked in and they said to me, "You have breast cancer and we need to go in there and do a lumpectomy." I said, "Okay, let's do it." For 1 year, I've been told that this is in my head. For 1 year, I was told that I've conjured up a sickness. For 1 year, I've endured not enjoying my family and them watching me suffer. Get it out of me. So Monday morning, I was in theatre. They did the lumpectomy. But at the same time, when I had done the mammogram and the ultrasound, they had picked up that I had a lump on my right breast. And they said, "Look, it was sitting at the back end of my wall. They couldn't biopsy it." Said, "While we have you under, we want to biopsy that lump." And I said, "Sure." They brought me back in after surgery a few days for the pathology results. And the doctor said, "We have removed the lump. The margins are clear. There is no lymph node involvement." And he was just excited. But at the same time, this doctor and I had connected. And I said to him, I didn't feel joy when he told me that. I said, "But there's a but coming." And he just stopped and looked at me. And I remember he had his hand on the table, and I put my hand over his hand and I said, "It's in the other breast, isn't it?" And he nodded his head. And that was really hard. My husband was sitting across from me. And I did yell out. I said, "Take them off." I said, "Just take them off. I've got 4 young children." I said, "Take them off." He said, "Look, you're a young mum and we can do this and we can do that." And I said, "No." I said, "Take them off. I don't need them. I want to be here for my children." And my husband said to him, "For 1 year, she has battled. For 1 year, the doctors have told her it's in her head. For once, can someone just do what she wants? Can someone just listen to her?" He goes, "She's my woman and she doesn't need them to be my woman." So the doctor left the office and he was teary-eyed, and he came back in and he said, "Okay, we'll do it." So on the 1st of April, and it wasn't no April Fool's Day joke, I went in and I had a double mastectomy. I was told I was given a pamphlet on how I would look afterwards, and I chose not to have any implants put. And At first, I thought I looked like Frankenstein, but then I learned to love myself, the new me. I was told there was no lymph node involvement. I went back to the neurologist and I said, "You owe me a PET scan," because I did ask him for that when I was not well. I said, "Something's wrong somewhere. I need a PET scan. Maybe that would detect what's wrong with me." I said, and for 1 year you've left this cancer going. I want a PET scan to see where this cancer has gone. We did the PET scan, and at the time, the results showed there was no cancer anywhere else. And I went on to live my life and recover from the surgery, which was really difficult and painful. But I've had joy because I had my family, I had my church family, I had friends, and I was so loved, supported, and wanted. And that really was what I needed to just keep going. I love life. I always have. Even through the challenges, I just loved life. I just see life as such a gift, And I guess that's why I always thought death isn't the end. There's more to this because I could feel there's more to me than just here. And that's why I always sought eternal life. What was that going to be like? Where would that be, And I found that through, the Lord. In 2022, it was January, and once again I had taken my kids out for lunch. It was, date day with mum kind of thing. I got in the car and the sensation of this strange fatigue came over me instantaneously, and the burning sensation started up again. I got home and I said to my husband, "There's cancer." And he goes, "What makes you say that?" I said, "I'm starting to burn." What we had worked out, all these symptoms, came from a condition called paraneoplastic syndrome. 1% of cancer patients develop this condition. It's an autoimmune response to the cancer. So what happened, the doctor explained to me, was that my body would produce antigens to try and attack the cancer, but the protein profile of my cancer cells was similar to the protein profile of my brain cells. So hence my body would attack my brain, and at the same time while it was trying to attack the cancer. And when I was diagnosed with the cancer, the neurologist said to me that if I had been left with that about 6 months later, I would have been a vegetable dying of breast cancer. So this paraneoplastic syndrome was a blessing and a curse. It set off all the alarm bells, but at the same time, it can cause a lot of grief. So in 2022, those symptoms started to come back on again, and I knew what that meant. Went back in, did the scan, and I lit up like a Christmas tree. There was cancer in the skeletal bones everywhere, from the scalp to the rib cage to the pelvic area. It's everywhere. And it had metastasized also to the liver. They told me that I have less than 2 years. I said, no. God gave me life, and when God's ready to take it, he'll take it. And I wanted to live. I wanted to live for my kids. I wanted to live. I just wanted to live for my kids. I wanted to see them finish school, at least. So I said to God, I'm not asking for everything, but can I at least see them get through school? So then I know they're going to be okay. It's been 3 years. And I asked God, if there is something out there, could you please show me what I could do? And God did. He sent friends that knew things to do with cancer, because they had lost loved ones. And they brought to me, other countries and what other countries are doing. And then I'm like, I can't afford this. I chose to stay home to raise the 4 children. We had a home. We paid it off. I wasn't interested in investment properties, holidays, or anything like that. So we were just happy to, pay our bills, feed the children, and just live life. And so my family rallied together and started a GoFundMe, which now has led me to Germany, and I am doing treatment where I have just received some good results. The doctor just told me that all the small tumours in my liver are no longer active. The other bigger tumours have shrunk enough that I have 2 sessions of microablation, which will just basically get rid of them and also maybe trigger an immune response to the cancer, where my immune system will then fight the cancer, and a whole bunch of other things. And I'm here on my own. I've been here for over 4.5 months, and by the time I go home, it'll be 6 months. I've had my daughter come at first. When she went back home to Australia, I had my sister come for 6 weeks. And then when she went back, I had a friend from school, Mary, and we've known each other since we were 12 years old. So she came and was here for 3 weeks. And then my beautiful cousin, who I haven't seen for 40 years, and he's the brother that I never got to have, Shadi. He's just arrived from Canada a few days ago so he could be here for my last chemo treatment. And I also have found brothers and sisters in Christ here in Germany who have loved on me, who have supported me, who have become my family. And that's God's goodness for me, for his love and provision in my life. And here I am today sharing this with you. Thank you.